Bonus video 3. Today I'm going to explain to you something that I call the envelope. It looks like an envelope. I'm going to sit right down and write myself a letter with the envelope. How does this have anything to do with color? We use the envelope for two purposes. Pencil ready? The first is something called color flooding. Color flooding, when you want to add a dash of color to a particular area, we'll grab our local adjustment tools like the killer tool, the brush, the adjustment brush. We'll fill the envelope with a particular color and we'll paint with that color to flood a little extra color in a particular area. Now, the way this tool is different from the color grading and the color mixer, the mixer and the grader, color grader, those are panels. And remember, they're global. They edit globally. So one difference with the envelope is that it's a local tool, much like the hue adjustment slider was, okay? So we've got the color mixer and the color grader, global colorizers. We've got the hue slider and now the envelope as local colorizers. Now, those are in addition to painting and using the tint slider or the temperature slider. So there are so many choices. How do you know which one to use and when? Well, the envelope is my go-to when I just want a little bit of color here, a little bit of splash of color there. But the second big reason that I use the envelope, I told you there were two major purposes. One is color flooding. The other is neutralizing color. And wow, you need to know the real color wheel in order to know what color neutralizes what color. Let's take a peek. I'm going to teach you some advanced techniques in addition to just colorizing, because we're to the point in the course where it's snowballing. It's not enough just to know the tools, but we have to know how everything works together in order to be efficient and perform advanced techniques. Here we go. Let's look at one of these images. I love this image. It's very sweet. These are friends of mine. Grandma, grandbaby, mommy, sisters, sister-in-laws, and so on. It's a sweet little image. And I'm being picky, but I'm being picky on purpose to teach, okay? Blonde hair, blonde hair. When I look at blonde hair, I'm looking to see, is there any area that's a little too brassy, a little too vibrant, for example? And I can see an example of it right here. That yellow hair is a little hot. It's a little brassy. Well, how do we tone that down? Now, you ladies might have all kinds of ways to do this. Maybe even some of you, you very blonde men know what I'm talking about. I'm not. I'm just a color guy. So I'm going to scroll. I'm going to grab my killer tool. I hit the letter K. I'm going to scroll down and introduce you to the color envelope. Now, doesn't that just look like an envelope? But it's used for mailing in a little bit of color. Tap the envelope, really tap it, and pick a color range for flooding or colorizing. Let me explain a little bit what we have here. You don't need to know everything I'm about to just say, but you get 5 very common photographic color filters at the ready. If you were used to shooting with film, you could go buy particular colors of photo filters for sky, for water, for warming individuals to different degrees. Right in the very middle, you have a completely neutral filter. I clicked on white. It's no color cast whatsoever. But I could say flood with a lot of blue, flood with a little blue. These are recognizable strengths of photo filters. Very warm sunsets, slightly warm flesh tones. These are just some go-tos from the old world of film. And I would have to buy those. They were glass. They would screw onto the front of my lens. Well, what if I wanted a new color? Well, you're kind of stuck going back down to the camera store, and they still didn't have every color imaginable even available. Well, welcome to the color picker. It's basically a filter that you would screw on the front of your lens. It would either add some color cast, and often we would use those filters to neutralize other color casts. We learned last video that we often might use a magenta filter to solve for too greenish fluorescent lights. Okay, these are filters. They add some color, but their ultimate effect is to neutralize. All right, I want to neutralize yellow. Now, you know on the real color wheel, blue is its real opposite. I'm just going to go click some blue. Now, if I click high on the blues, notice what happens to my saturation slider. Low, high, low, high. You don't have to concern yourself with where you click high or low on this. Just go pick yourself the hue. I'm going to pick a blue hue because later I can come and recontrol the saturation to my taste. Here we go. Thank you. I'm going to get a brush. That's about the right size actually. And just sort of brush that blue over that hair. Now, you didn't see any bluing occur. No. Until I really push, you'll see very, very little. It's not bluing so much as it's neutralizing the opposite on the color wheel. It's neutralizing yellow. Now, I'm going to zoom in there. You didn't notice, but I sure did. I'm going to hit the letter P for preview. Oh yeah, look how brassy and yellow that looked. P. Now it's toned down. So I use the color envelope to neutralize here or there areas that are distracting. Let's cancel. Let's move to a new image. You'll use it to eliminate colors that are distracting. You'll also use it to eliminate awkward color in areas that are caused by the context that is not yet seen in the image. What do I mean by that? This young woman was standing under a magenta awning, but the awning doesn't show up in the photo, and so there's an awkward magenta, pinkish sort of color cast on this side we have to fix. Out of context, just the picture of the model, the young woman, without the awning telling us what's going on there, it looks a little out of place. So, the letter K, Killer Tool, scroll down to my envelope, click what color neutralizes magenta on the real color wheel. We know it's green. Okay. Now I'm going to get a brush and just see if I can do a little swoop here. Oh, that's way too much, isn't it? That is not even good. I've reset Command Option R on the Mac, Control Alt R on the PC. We talked about that in week 1. It was just a quick reset button, a reset to reset everything. There was apparently a little brightness slider dialed into that as well. So I'm going back in, picking some green. This has nothing to do with brightness. But you see how it's applying that green in that area where I painted? A little bit more here. All right. It's solving my problem, but it's too much of a solve. I'm going to go back into the envelope while my brush is still being used, while it's being active. I'm going to click back in, and now, while it's still active, I can play with the amount of saturation, the amount of neutralness. Hey, that's not looking bad. A little bit more. I think I'm happy. Let's hit before, P. Oh yeah, and after. We've used the envelope to neutralize a pink cast. Neutralizing. I'm going to do the letter K again. I need a new brush. Command Option R on the Mac, Control Alt R on the PC, reset all my sliders, including the envelope. I can sneak back in, click the envelope. Let's ask for some real rosy cheek color now. I'm just going to grab some rosy cheek color, changing my brush size, and let's just toss a little in. So the first time you saw me use the brush, it was to neutralize magenta. This time I'm using the brush and the envelope to flood with a little magenta. I said a little magenta. This doesn't look quite right. So I'm going to go back into my envelope. My brush is still active, and just dial the saturation back so that I can get something that works in context. A little dab is going to do me there. Oh, beautiful. So I use the same tool both to neutralize and to flood a little color. The color envelope. Cancel. We're going to try another example. Let's go look at our fearless leader. Been dying to open this one up. Fearless leader, don't worry, I'm not going to do anything crazy. I'm going to show you how to use something called curves. Curves. Curves are global. Let's go look. When I first open my panel, I see basic. Remember that? And right below it, curve. Now you're figuring out that the second of these is probably going to be Command 2. Control 2 on the PC if you want to use a shortcut. But I see it. It's right there. I'm just going to pop it open. I'm going to explain what curves is. It's a silly name at first glance because it doesn't look very curvy. In fact, what I'm seeing in this curves panel is a scrunched up version of my actual histogram up top. We're reliving the histogram as an average of red, green, and blue underneath as sort of an overlay, tissue paper, onion skin for my curves panel. The curve is actually this big white line, and it's not curvy yet. Several ways to play with the curve. Adjust something called the parametric curve. And when I sneak down onto the histogram and the curve, you see that depending upon where I drag, I'm not clicking and dragging, I'm just hovering my cursor. It says, Rick, you might be dealing right here with just the highlights area. It's another way to play like a slider would be highlights. If I sneak in, I start to see light stuff, dark stuff, really dark stuff, shadows. So I could use the parametric curve, it's actually my least favorite, to drag straight up or straight down, and it impacts only the darkest shadows. See how the rest of the white line remains uncurvy. If you don't like what you did, keep pulling. Just pull it off. Don't like that. Option, reset. We're back to square, back to 1. All right, the parametric curve. It allows me to grab specific areas. Now, if I want to drag, I could, but I could also sneak down and play with the sliders in order to move the curve, whack the curve around. Now, by default, there's a little gradient here with 3 dots. And that gradient is in where it's doing the splits. You can change where the splits in that little bulbous selection area occur by playing with the splits. Okay? I say it's too complicated for my brain. I don't play in this very much. I'm going to hold the option key and reset. Let's talk about where I love to play with curves. It's not the parametric. It's the plain old point curve. point curve is useful to me. I find there are a couple of advanced curve movements that you would use if you were a professional retoucher. One advanced curve movement would be to click right in the middle and drag up for brightness, drag down for darkness. That's it. Pull off, blink, it undoes. So I've got a little point there. If I click and let go, that little point can go high or low. Don't think about dragging sideways. That's not how the curve wants to be used. It wants to drag up or down. Pull off, it disappeared. That is red and green and blue mixed together to create grayscale, or overall lightness and darkness. That's what I'm working on there. There is another professional curve movement. It's called an S curve. And the S curve, you grab around this square. There's click. You see where these two lines intersect. And skip one and come over to the other end. Click. What I'm doing is working with an area called the highlights. It's 25% in from the side. Well, on the other side, 25% in from the side is going to be my shadows, my 75% tonal ranges and my 25% tonal ranges. I don't have to know what those ranges are. I'm going to drag those off. I just need to know that there is a custom move, very professional, old school, where you go to that top right corner and you click at the crisscross. You do the same thing on the bottom left corner at the crisscross. You're set. Pull one up a little bit, pull one down a little bit, and it creates like the side of a bell curve. It's creating a bell curve. In fact, it's often called the bell curve, or the S, subtle S-shaped curve. And an S curve, a bell curve, is a contrast improving curve. It's a way to add contrast. It's too much here, so I'm going to plunk it off. Plunk it off. Why are they showing me the histogram? Why is that distracting behind the curve? It's not a distraction, it's a useful tool. It's saying, look at this image, and we're going to help you. In this image, it wouldn't be that useful to click at the crisscross and at this crisscross, because these mountains represent the actual tones that are in this image. So there's a big mountain there. Click. There's a big mountain there. See that spike? Click where the curve overlaps it. Here's the next peak of the mountain. Click where that is. I get a better contrast curve if I grab the outer two now for those mountains and push up and push down. The histogram is trying to say accurately for this image, specifically, those would be the areas I would move my curve marks. Now, of course, there are other ways to play with lightness and darkness and contrast. Let me reset my image. Option, reset. Under the basic panel, you have a choice. You have a choice. You could brighten, trust me, it's the equivalent of raising the curve. Or darken, trust me, it's the equivalent of dropping the curve. It is. It feels the same. Or contrast. And when you play with contrast, trust me, it's as if you grab those marks and you pushed at 25 and 75%. You're creating more distance. That's what those sliders are actually doing to your image. But in the old days, we didn't have sliders. We edited these things with curves. It's a holdover from an older era. But I can still use it to my advantage. Let's close the basic panel, knowing it does the same thing. Under curves, I'm going to click on the, this image to me, I don't know if it's just finally getting to me, but it all looks a little yellow. Yeah, it does all look a little yellow. Our fearless leader looks a little yellow, and we know he's anything but that. So I'm going to pick the specific opposite to yellow, in this case blue. And I clicked it, and I'm only editing the blues versus the yellows. This big spike, I think it represents, well, it's either this big concrete pillar in the background because there's so much of it, or it's his face. I don't know which. So I'm going to hold the Command key on the Mac. On the PC, I'm going to hold the Control key and come out to his face. Command or Control on the PC. Click on his flesh tone. And it tells me where to move on the curve. Where specifically to move on the curve to affect that general tonal range, not color, but tonal range, the brights and darks that represent the middle tones of his face. If it looks a little yellow, I'm going to drag straight up and take the yellow away. Now I could go crazy. You see that? I'm not going to go crazy. Instead, I'm just going to push up a little bit to get the yellow out of his face, the too much of yellowness out of his face. I'm going to hit the letter P, preview, before and after. A little more. You're going to see it now. P. Oh yeah, very yellow. P, not so yellow. P, P, preview. So you can use curves to take out a color cast. Redness versus cyan, greenness versus magenta, blueness versus yellow, and you could add them together. Let's click green. Same game, Command or Control click the flesh areas. It says, click right here on this side of the spike for the magentaness. If it needs to be more magenta, I'll pull down. If it needs to be less magenta, that's a green move. So I'm going to make a tiny little move. Get the flesh right. Time out. Look at the curves. We'll look above the curves. I've got the histogram. I've got the curve. I've got a point on the curve. And if I look up, I see a little white dot under the green circle. A little white dot under the blue circle. That's a reference. That's feedback from Adobe that I have adjusted both those curves. Last week I showed you that there are little white marks that show up next to the tools, little half white circles that show up next to the tools that I've already used. Same treatment. Those little white dots are just saying you've made moves here. I'm pretty happy with this. P, oh yeah, that was way too yellow. P, pretty good. P, P. I'm going to close the curves. I showed you the envelope. I've shown you curves. Let me introduce you to a really amazing advanced trick. I just hit the letter M. Boy, do you want to know that shortcut. Boy, do you want to know that shortcut. Grab your pencil. M for the masks. Masks. M, show me my mask panel. M, or not. M. 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 And there are some marvelous new artificial intelligence ways to select very particular areas. Selecting in Photoshop is a real pain. You know this if you've been in Photoshop. Selecting in Camera Raw has been even harder. It has. And anything I've ever done on this image with a local tool, the radial tool, the gradient tool, or the brush, are being remembered. And if I show my overlays and hover, you're going to be able to see, here's one. I must have run something along his face. I don't want it anymore. I'm going to go back in time because this is not what I like. and it's non-destructive. So I'm going to click on that mask 5, whatever dumb name that was, and hit delete. And it got rid of the mask and any edit I had done along the edge of his face. Masks are automatically generated when you paint with any local adjustment brush. The adjustment brush, radial gradient or the linear gradient. Okay, now you can ask for any one of those. I want a new mask. Now I've been doing that with keyboard shortcuts. Give me a brush, I hit K. Give me a gradient, a linear gradient, hit G. Give me a radial gradient. You'll see more of that week 4. Hit J, that makes no sense, but there it is. In the previous bonus video, I taught you that you could shift C to select a color range. Well, look, L, look, I can do a luminance range, a brightness only range as a selection by doing Shift L. More on that later. Or click and learn more about masking from Adobe themselves. But 2 that don't have keyboard shortcuts, which are extremely useful for me, are at the top. I can't imagine this is going to work, but let's try it. Select my subject. And when I do that, I want to, there it is. There's the area that was selected. If I hit the letter Y, I get to see the overlay. The artificial intelligence just selected our fearless leader, the great Brian Peterson, including most of his crazy wild hair. There it is. Shoulders all the way down. Incredible to me. I hit Y so I could see the overlay. I could see what I got. But I just set his color. He's cool. He's good. Check this out. Grab your pencil. Remember I hit M to get here. I went up and selected my subject, but I get to hit X on any selection mask. Any area you've done painting, you can hit X. Exchange it, please. I don't want my subject. X. Change it, please, and give me everything but my subject. That is the new area I have selected. And if that's the area I have selected, oh, please don't show me the overlay anymore. I can uncheck it, or I can hit Y. We learned that. I now have everything but our fearless leader selected. Sneaking down to my color flutter, I've got a beautiful selection of the background, that pillar, which is supposed to be neutral, but it's not color. It all looks a little bit yellow to me. Well, then I'm going to add a little bit of blue to the background. And do you see how that neutralized the yellow in the background? I'm going to play with the saturation slider here to taste. So I'm happy. That looks pretty good. Okay. It's done another piece of magic for me. I've color corrected Brian's face. I've color corrected in a different direction the background. He is very saturated in comparison to that background that's not saturated. That is creating color contrast in the image. Great color, not great color, perfect. It draws attention to your hero, your subject. And Brian is indeed one of my heroes. I'm going to hit the letter P so we can see the beforehand. Wow. P after. P. Woo! I'm about to save this as a snapshot. Command Shift S. My hero. Hit OK. I don't want this to go to his head, even though his head is completely color corrected. I think I probably ought to call it this. Color corrected. There. And now I can go back out. Shift S is the keyboard shortcut. Or manually click my many snapshots and see which of these snapshots I've saved in my editing past for our fearless leader. Yeah, no. Color corrected looks good to me. and I hit done. That's it. Stay tuned for bonus video 4. It only gets better from here. We're about to finish up week 3. Let you play for a week. Be sure you get me your questions by Wednesday night and let me help you solve your problems. If you want me to work on your JPEGs, that's fine. But if you want me to work more precisely on your RAW files, send them to me via Dropbox. Place a DNG or a CR2 or an NEF or an ACR, whatever flavor of RAW file your camera captures, send it to me. Drop it in your Dropbox. Copy the link for that Dropbox and send me an email. I'll show you what we can really do with the superpower of Adobe Camera Raw with your actual RAW files. We'll be doing that on yours day.